All right, so we're back and ready to really dissect this crazy Manchester Derby upset. Man United beat Man City 2-1. And we've got a whole bunch of expert articles and analyses to help us kind of break down exactly how they managed to pull that off. We're going to be talking about some tactical genius, some goal droughts, and maybe even if Haaland was losing his magic a little bit. Are you ready to get into it?
Yeah. What's super interesting to me is this whole idea of creativity crisis happening over at Man City. I mean, you saw the headlines, right? Goal drought, offensive slump. But those don't really tell the whole story, do they?
Right. It's less about doom and gloom
Right.
and more about what is actually going on. And the sources we've got have some really interesting data about this. City's that signature pullback tactic, that beautiful weaving play that used to shred defenses, it's basically gone.
It's pretty wild, right? Only 4 chances created from pullbacks since August and not a single goal. I mean, last season that was their bread and butter. So what gives you...
Well, the experts are pointing to a couple of big things. First, the fact that Rodri and De Bruyne are out is massive. They're the midfield maestros.
Mm-hmm.
They set the tempo and create those perfect passes that just unlock defenses. Without them, it's like an orchestra missing its conductor.
100%. The whole rhythm is off. City's attack relies on being fluid and having those intricate passing combinations. But without Rodri and De Bruyne to make that happen, it's just become way too predictable. Teams have figured them out.
And it's putting so much pressure on Haaland, isn't it? I mean, the guy is carrying almost half of their expected goals.
Yeah.
But even he needs support. Needs those good quality chances created by a midfield that's working well.
Absolutely. And that's where the tactical battle gets really interesting. Because when City's midfield is struggling, other teams can suddenly just focus on shutting down Haaland, which is exactly what happened in this match.
So let's switch gears for a second and dive into how Manchester United actually pulled off this upset. I mean, their manager, Ruben Amorim, put on a real tactical masterclass.
Oh, yeah, for sure. His 3-4-3 formation, that wasn't just some random choice. It was designed to hit City right where it hurts. See, by pushing his wingbacks high and packing the midfield, he totally clogged up those central areas that City usually owns.
It forced them out wide, which is not really their strength. And then United's just this aggressive pressing just kicks in, making it basically impossible to build any kind of attack from out there. I mean, the sources are praising Amorim's high backline, too. Super risky, but it worked.
Risky but calculated, for sure. It squeezed all that space that City loves to use to make those quick passing plays. And it let United spring those crazy counterattacks. Remember that double movement attack they used?
Yeah.
Genius.
Right. 2 players making runs one after the other. It totally confused the City defense. They created so many chances from that. It's like they were reading City's playbook and coming up with their own counter strategy right there on the fly.
And speaking of adapting, Amorim was switching up formations throughout the match, wasn't he? Oh, yeah. 3-4, 3-4, 4-2, even a 5-4-1 at some points. He was always tweaking things, keeping City guessing and making sure they couldn't get comfortable. A true masterclass in tactical flexibility.
And the sources are really pointing to those substitutions he made, bringing on Amad Diallo late in the game. Genius.
Yeah, I mean, the kid comes on, wins the penalty, scores the winning goal. Says a lot about Amorim's ability to read the game, anticipate what's going to happen, and make those big decisions.
So we've talked about City struggling and United's tactical brilliance. But what about Haaland? Because even with all that, he's still a goal-scoring machine. But our sources are pointing to a really interesting trend here.
It looks like the top defenders, the best, they might have figured out how to stop Haaland. His goal rate against those big 6 teams and the top clubs in Europe drops by more than half. That's huge. It's almost like they've studied his every move, they know how he runs, and they've figured out how to take away his biggest strengths.
It's wild, right? Because for most teams, Haaland's practically unstoppable. But then you put him up against these elite defenders, and it's a totally different story.
The sources actually have some great examples of this. Remember that match against Arsenal a few weeks back? Their center backs, Saliba and Gabriel, basically shut him down. They limited his touches, closed down all the space. He was invisible for most of the match.
And what about that Champions League final against Inter Milan? Haaland was so quiet in that one, too. And the sources say it was mostly because of Francesco Acerbi, this veteran defender who just used his experience and positioning to shut down all of Haaland's runs.
It's like they've cracked the code. They deny him the space he needs, cut off those through balls he loves so much. They make him play with his back to the goal, which is not his strong suit.
So the question is this the start of something bigger? Is this a weakness in Haaland's game that other top defenders are going to start exploiting? Or will he adapt and change his game to overcome this challenge?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's what makes this whole thing so interesting, because we might be seeing a turning point here, not just for Haaland, but for how teams defend against him.
Okay, but let's zoom out for a second. We've talked a lot about individual players and tactics, but what does this all mean for the bigger picture? What does it mean for Manchester City and Manchester United going forward?
Well, for City, this loss shows some real weaknesses that they have to fix if they want to be on top again. This over-reliance on Haaland, the lack of creativity in the midfield without their key players, these are big problems.
Like their whole system is built around these few key players, and when those guys are missing, the whole machine just falls apart. But on the other hand, this win could be huge for Manchester United. Could this be the start of a new era under Amorim?
It's definitely possible. He's a tactical genius, and if he can keep getting this level of performance out of his players, they could be real contenders for the title.
But they got to be consistent. Can Amorim keep up this level of tactical brilliance all season long? Can he keep motivating his players to play this hard week after week? That's the real challenge.
And don't forget about all the questions surrounding Haaland. Will he adapt and get over this apparent weakness against top defenders? Or will this keep happening and hold him back? These are questions we'll be watching as the season goes on.
So much to think about, right? This deep dive has given us a look into these tactical battles, these struggles and triumphs of these players. But it's just the beginning. The story's still unfolding, and I can't wait to see what happens next.
And that's the beauty of football, isn't it? It's always evolving, always surprising us with those moments of brilliance that can change everything. We've given you the insights, the analysis, the data. Now it's your turn.
Exactly. What are your predictions? What's going to happen to Haaland, to Man City, to Man United? This is just the start of the conversation. Keep digging, keep analyzing, and most importantly, keep enjoying the beautiful game.
Yeah, it's like these elite defenders have studied his every move, they've anticipated his every run, and they've figured out how to kind of neutralize his biggest strengths.
It's so fascinating, isn't it? Because for most teams, Haaland is unstoppable. But then you put him up against these top-tier defenders, and it's a whole different story.
Yeah, and the searches actually have some great examples of this. Remember that match against Arsenal a few weeks back? Their center-back pairing, Saliba and Gabriel, they basically pocketed Haaland, limited his touches, closed down the space. He was a ghost for most of the match.
And that Champions League final against Inter Milan, Haaland was kept so quiet in that game, too. The sources point to Francesco Acerbi as the main reason. Like a veteran defender who just used his experience and positioning to completely shut down Haaland's runs.
It's like they figured out his blueprint. They deny him the space he thrives in, cut off those through balls that he's so deadly with, force him to play with his back to goal, which is not his strong suit.
So it makes you wonder, is this a sign of things to come? Is this like a chink in Haaland's armor that other top defenders are going to start exploiting? Or will he adapt and evolve his game to overcome this challenge?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's what makes this whole situation so interesting. Because we might be witnessing a turning point here, not just for Haaland, but for the way teams defend against him.
Okay, but let's zoom out for a sec. We've talked a lot about individual players and tactics, but what does this all mean for the big picture? What does it mean for Manchester City and Manchester United moving forward?
Well, for City, this loss really exposes some vulnerabilities that they're going to need to address if they want to get back to that dominant position. This over-reliance on Haaland, the lack of creativity in the midfield without those key playmakers, those are serious issues.
Right. It's like their whole system is built around these few key players, and when those players are missing, the whole machine starts to break down. But on the flip side, this win could be a turning point for Manchester United. Could this be like the start of a new era under Amorim?
It's definitely a possibility. I mean, his tactical skills are undeniable. And if he can keep getting these kinds of performances from his players, they could become real contenders for the title.
But consistency is key. Can Amorim keep up this level of tactical genius for a whole season? Can he keep motivating his players to play this hard week in and week out? That's the challenge.
And let's not forget about those questions surrounding Amorim. Will he adapt and overcome this apparent weakness against top defenders? Or will this become a recurring problem that kind of limits his potential? These are questions we'll be exploring as the season goes on.
Yeah, it feels like we're at this really important point in the Premier League, right? This match, this result. It feels like way more than just some random thing.
Totally. You're seeing these underlying trends, these changes in tactics, and they can have huge effects as the season keeps going. I mean, think about it. For City, it's not just about scoring more goals. It's about finding that creativity again, that unpredictable fluidity that made them so dominant.
And it might mean they have to change their system. Become less reliant on those key players. Find new ways to break through defenses. Because right now, if you take out Rodri and De Bruyne, it's like taking the engine out of a race car.
Totally throws their whole game off. And the sources are saying that Pep Guardiola, their manager, might have to rethink how he does things, especially when it comes to Haaland.
It's kind of like a paradox, isn't it? You have this amazing goal scorer, but if you rely on him too much, it actually makes you predictable. Other teams can just focus on shutting him down, and then your attack goes nowhere.
Exactly. And that's why Amorim's tactics were so smart. He saw that weakness, that over-reliance on Haaland, and he basically built his whole plan around taking advantage of it.
But the big question for Manchester United is, can they keep this up? Can they turn these tactical masterclasses into wins week after week? Because one great performance doesn't mean you're going to win the title. They have to prove that they can keep up this level of intensity and discipline every single week.
And that's where the mental game comes in. Can Amorim keep his players motivated, make them keep wanting more? Can he make them believe that they can really compete with the best teams, not just on one good night, but for a whole season?
So much to think about. This deep dive has given us a glimpse into these tactical battles, these individual struggles and triumphs. But it's really just the start. The story's still going, and we can't wait to see what happens next.
That's what's so great about football, isn't it? It's always evolving. There are always surprises and those moments of brilliance that can change everything. We've given you the insights, the analysis, the data. Now it's your turn.
Exactly. What are your predictions? What's going to happen to Haaland, to Manchester City, to Manchester United? This is just the beginning of the conversation. Keep exploring, keep analyzing, and most importantly, keep enjoying the beautiful game.